morning, it's 8:30. Welcome to our final Board Finance Committee for the 2024 and 2025 school year. Can't believe we're already saying that. We'll start off on our agenda with public comments. Chris, is there any?
No.
Okay. No. All right, so then that'll take us right into our curriculum update with Mr. Haid.
Thank you. It's going to be brief today. We do not have an instructional highlight for tomorrow, sorry. June is a hard time to rustle teachers up to do that. So it'll be very brief. And the only update that I really have, at least that's going to land on this agenda, Julie will be talking about in a little bit, which is pretty routine. It's the we'll be seeking some funds for math journals. We like those. So we'll be doing that. Just as an update, junior kindergarten continues to I want to say confound us, but the numbers continue to grow, which is a good problem. We just yesterday had another session to allow parents to come in and do some testing. It's not really a test, but just to see for placement. So we were running those here in this building because our elementaries are quite busy right now, and so. The total number, probably another 50 families between the two sessions that we ran. So I think we found something that the community desires, and trying to, our next challenge is trying to figure out those placements in terms of kindergarten, junior kindergarten, where they're going to go. So those are all great problems to have, so I'm not complaining. It's new this year, so we're kind of, this is the first pancake for programming. Enjoying it, having a good time, getting a lot of positive feedback, and meeting a lot of smiling parents. So thanks for supporting that.
Thanks. Thank you.
I like that analogy of the first pancake.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does this impact busing?
At some point, just because you're bringing, kindergarten affects busing.
Right.
Junior kindergarten will.
Is it the same schedule as
yeah.
the kindergarten? Okay.
Yeah, they'll be on think of junior kindergarten as just kindergarten.
Okay.
Just for a little bit younger kids.
Okay.
But yeah, nothing is different though, the same programming, same opportunity for busing,
Yep.
lunch, recess, all of those things.
Okay.
Yeah, good question.
So you're thinking into like multiple classrooms of it in certain buildings potentially and all? That's the type of numbers? Never mind.
Yeah.
That's a good update. We're
looking at one per.
Right now, yeah. So when you think about, originally we had programmed 3, and now we'll just say more than 3, and trying to figure out, where they're going to be in the sections, and then, there's just questions too. If you have if the screener says this, and I really want this, and what are the numbers going to, so there's a lot of things to kind of work through, but again, good problems to have. So we're, again, excited about it, but multiple junior kindergartens in the building, it's something that's crossed our minds, and what will be, we'll figure it all out.
Right.
Good question, CJ.
Great answer.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, thanks, Scott. That takes us to our discussion information section. So I left monthly financial statements on there just to say that we don't have them. I want to think I skipped it, just the timing, June 3rd, and so we do not have reporting out for the month of May this time. But next we have our budget update, and I'd like to introduce a couple of folks from Plant Moran, Real Point. They have helped us with our student enrollment projections this year. We pivoted a little bit. We've used a couple different third parties in prior years, and so I've asked Doug Phillips and Paul Wills to join us this morning, and they are going to walk us through a presentation.
All right, good morning. My name is Doug Phillips. I'm a Senior Vice President with Plant Moran, Real Point. I lead our West Michigan program team, and I work out of our Grand Rapids office. We are working for a number of school districts here in the region. Grand Rapids Public Schools is probably the largest, but also Northview. We've been working with them for many years. Caledonia as well. Portage, Battle Creek, Lakeview, number of districts across the region, and then of course across the state. With me is Paul Wills. Paul is a partner with the firm, works out of our Southfield office, and we're pleased to be here. We got involved, Julie reached out to us back in March and asked us, from a referral from her counterpart at Northview Schools, to come and help with enrollment projection efforts here at Forest Hills. So, as Julie mentioned, we're with Plant Moran Real Point. You're probably familiar with Plant Moran as a company, large audit, tax, business consulting firm. So our group, Real Point, we're a subgroup within Plant Moran focused on real estate design and capital programming and project assistance for clients who have those specialized needs, like school districts. So we have about 135 folks in our team across multiple states, but really a center of gravity here in Michigan because the firm is headquartered here. But there you go.
Here we go, perfect.
So we do real estate consulting, we assist with transaction management for clients, both in the public sector and the private sector, acquiring or disposing of properties. And then we also do project and program management for capital investments for mid-sized organizations like schools that maybe don't have that expertise in-house. So one of the subsets of that in K-12 is looking at enrollment and space need drivers, and then determining how do we adapt our space and our capital space to meet the needs of our organization and schools. Of course, it's students. How many students do we have? Where is that trend going, and how do we plan for that and plan our capital investments accordingly? So I mentioned some of our clients here in West Michigan, but again, we work with 30 of the top 50 districts around the state and many others. So we've been doing this work, Paul, how long?
25 years.
And you've been doing it with us
25 years.
I've been with the organization, this is my 5th year, so background in construction and capital program. So.
It's not really the gist of it. So again, I'm Paul Wills with Plant Moran Real Point. I've been with the firm for 25 years. I'm actually one of the demographers and architects with the firm. And I've had the privilege to actually work with Forest Hills probably about 7 or 8 years ago. Again, I think the districts do a really good job kind of looking at different sources, if it's Middle Cities, Midwestern demographics, Stanford, or ourselves going forward. We actually presented this MSBO most recently here, really talking about what's happening in the state of Michigan. And so, I'm not going to ask by a show of hands if anyone was born in 1958, but congratulations, you're at the very top of the baby boomers. There was 208,000 live births that year. And if you look at last year, 2023, which is audited by the Department of Human Health Services, we're just under 100,000, about 99,000. That's the lowest it's been since 1940. So you talk about the brain drain and all these other different things that have happened. So what's happening across the state? We're actually 5 years past COVID. A lot of people joke there's going to be this huge baby boom. There's actually the opposite effect, that the birth rate actually decreased. Coincidentally, actually, divorces were up. But anyways, long story short. So when Doug says we do this for corporate clients, we do it for Delta Dental, we do it for ACE, we do it for Carhartt, we found we could actually draw the school district's boundaries and give you the same information relative to demographics going forward. So again, this is just something that really from 2000 really to 2023, the state used to have almost 2 million students in public education. Now it's just under 1.3 or 1.4 million. That trend, again, we're not seeing that increasing anytime soon, but we're also starting to see this level off, and we'll talk a little bit about that here shortly. So, again, as Doug mentioned, we work with probably over 100 districts, a lot of your peer districts around the state. So if it's the Grosse Points, the Birminghams, the Bloomfields, the Troys, Rochesters, obviously Forest Hills, you know, what are some of their challenges and opportunities? We heard junior kindergarten, we're seeing a huge push right now. How does enrollment overlay into our utilization for our buildings? We know you're in the middle of beginning of a $340 million bond. What may have to change, you know, again, from a classroom standpoint. So this is just some data points, really from the administration team, yes.
Sorry, how does this compare to national, do you know national birth?
Yeah, so actually there used to be about 4 million births in the United States for about 3.6. So if it wasn't for immigration, we'd actually be like below 300 million. So at the end of the day, Colorado for the first time has actually experienced a decrease, like they were 25 years growth. The last 2 years had about 10% decrease. And we'll talk a little bit about, you know, what are the challenges of, let's say, Forest Hill, where it's community that's not necessarily vacant land like in Caledonia where people build 800 homes.
Right.
I think the entry-level homes is probably not your 0 to 5-year-olds. We'll talk a little bit about that. But yeah, this is actually across the state, actually across the globe. If you read anything about Japan, China, they're in a very similar where the births are actually less than 2. It's about 1.64, and the death rate's about 2.15. So again, there's just a natural decrease. But globally, we'll still be about 8 billion people by 2050. But that's more third world, Africa, South America, and stuff like that. So we're gonna focus really tight here.
Yep.
So
No, no,
that's a great question.
No.
Yeah.
But you're right about the national trend.
Yeah, the national
Michigan's
trend.
trend is a little steeper, but it is a national trend.
Okay.
So right now, Texas, Carolinas, and Florida are the only 3 states that are actually increasing in terms of school population.
Okay.
That bubble's still about 54 million kids across the United States. So one of the things we've done, as I mentioned, we take the polygon of the district's boundaries, and we actually do a snapshot of what's happening in there. How many households? How many households have children? Who's public versus private? Where are some of those opportunities maybe bring some kids back, either via programming, et cetera. So we kind of overlaid your schools here. One of the things that we're able to do, we obviously did it for this, but if you want to do, let's say, a heat map of where all your students are by building, just use like inter-district transfer, et cetera, we have that opportunity again if it becomes a planning opportunity. So again, what you're going to see in the next several slides is really what's happening in this polygon right here. So total population about 51,245. There's 14,000 families. Median age about 2.65. So when you start taking a look at it, the children per housing unit is about 0.45. So it says, hey, I'm building 100 homes. What should I expect? About 44 kids. That's pretty much 0 through, I should say, grades K through 12. One of the things I want to point out is you start taking a look at the 0 to 5-year-olds. So there's 675 5-year-olds, 628, but you can see this natural decrease. Again, that's going to be contributed to the birth rate, which we'll look here shortly. We break the same information down by pre-K through 9 through 12. Again, kind of showing where those opportunities, again, for that pre-K opportunities in the junior kindergartners. On the lower left, you'll see kind of the breakdown of public versus private. Keep in mind, private is any tuition-based, but if you've got homeschool or charter, that's going to be part of the public as well. And I think we actually shared some information with this administration team, like, hey, here's our loss rate of schools of choice, but more importantly, here's what the numbers are in terms of private versus public. Upper right-hand side, again, just kind of shows you more of the income levels as well as housing values. When you start getting with 60% of your housing values between 3 and 800,000, like there's not a lot of entry-level homes in that forecast going forward. So one of the things we can provide is average age of household owner, average age of the resident in totality. Obviously, you got a senior center and some other activities if you're interested in some of the additional data. So this is looking back to 2020, and coming out of COVID, presenting out to 5 years. As you can see, the total population is relatively steady. It's actually going to go up about 1%. But if you look at the 0 to 5s, you're going to see some significant decreases. Basically 1 to up to 10%, 11% going forward. And really, that's going to be attributable really through a factor of births going forward. Same information. 2020, you can see this natural decrease. We actually presented the Kent ISD about a month ago and just talked about holistically what's happening in Kent County going forward and some of the opportunities and challenges from
Same
that
curve.
perspective. Yep. This chart, again, kind of takes the pre-K, then breaks it down by 2020, 2024, and 2029. So again, at the pre-K level, you see there's over 1,000 kids at that time period, projecting up to 826, about 150 less students from that perspective. You see that trend really from kindergarten, really first through 4th grade, 5th through 8th grade, and obviously 9th through 12th grade going forward. From an averaging standpoint, you look at private versus public, you're right in line with probably Novi schools, Rochester schools. We do work with Bloomfield, Birmingham schools. That's the percentage as high as 25%, private to public. Some other schools are in that 12, 15%. The state average is about 10% private to public. So obviously you're just a little bit larger than that at 15%. So how does Plant Moran Real Point do demographics? So we talked about what's happening geographically, number of homes, number of families. Again, thank you to the administration team. We looked at all your audited count days from fall and spring for the last 7 years. And we take a look at the live births again, which are audited by the Department of Human Health. And we're at the far right here where we obviously go through a review to make sure we're not missing anything. If there's a new charter school, if there's a change of policy, inter-district transfers, school choice, things of that nature, and we know you're a closed district, so again, that's something that we kind of keep an eye on of those opportunities. So really, we take a look at it, going back to 2018, just pre-COVID. This is really the dip you saw, really at the K-5 level. Again, looking at your historical catchment, where you're at with enrollments, you can see the elementary schools be about 3,500 or 3,400 by 2029. Middle school level, which is going to be the blue on the lower third right there, right around 2,000 students. So we do see people moving into Forest Hills area. It's not going to be at the elementary level, it's really going to be at the secondary, middle school, and ultimately high school level. And your high school obviously is going to level off about 2,700 students going forward. The one thing we kind of noticed, if you look at total K-12, again, back in 2018, about 9,500, and about 8,000, just over 8,000 in 2029.
This is in district?
Yes. Yeah. So what are some of the key takeaways? Again, the total population is going to stay relatively level. Number of families is going to maintain steady. What you're going to see though is a lot of people, those 18 to 26-year-olds will graduate and not necessarily move out of the district. So that population will still be guilty of a 22 and a 24-year-old who both graduated still living at home, waiting for mortgage rates to drop below 8%. Again, we talked about the school-age children. You know, Kent County, just like Ingham County, Oakland County, Macomb County, has a pretty significant decrease in live births. The next 0 to 5 has started to level off post-COVID, which is good. Your capture rate. So historically, you've been about 6.8%. What I mean by that is, if there was X amount of kids born that particular kindergarten level, you capture roughly 6.5% to 7%. That 6.8% has been pretty steady over the last 5 to 6 years. So again, going back to 2018, about 9,700 students. 2024, about 8,800 students. Again, kind of looked at a total K-12, about a decrease of about 1,500 students. So kind of next steps, again, we looked at, again, opportunities, understanding you're going to go from X to Y, what are those opportunities potentially for increase of JK, special programs. You take a look at the secondary middle school levels, how does that impact enrollment from that perspective? As I mentioned, you had probably a 10-year capital plan that got approved through a $340 million bond, but does things have to change? Grand Rapids is a great example. They passed a $195 million bond issue. They were coming out of COVID and said, hey, we're going to lose X amount of students. So they actually reallocated funds that were going to a particular program in school and redirected it because long-term they knew that was going to be something else other than a traditional K-12 school. So at the end of the day, what are those other fundings? I know the state right now is really looking at funding grants for planning, long-term capital planning. So again, at that point, I'll turn back over to the board and administration team for questions. And go back if any slides if you want to get questions. Good. That's usually the question slide.
Yeah.
Because it affects financials. So again, you have your foundation allowance, and again, you have your fall and spring counts, and again, this just provides some planning templates for long-term planning. So.
I would just offer as a reminder is that these guys were able to provide for us the public parochial, more poignant, where before we had that other data that was primarily the all of the public students as far as how many we have and so on. So the other part is the number of preschool children. You probably noticed there's more in the private and the preschool area. That's something that we talked about and trying to address and capture and so on as well. I just wanted to bring those things forward for you.
I think the preschool for 4-year-olds is kind of, again, one of those unknowns where a lot of school districts look at some utilization opportunities. And in addition to JK, they're saying, can I have a preschool program, either satellites or maybe a combined facility? We have some that, hey, this wing is empty, I could get 6 classrooms of pre-K and really start doing a tuition-based pre-K. I think Novi is a great example of that in Livonia, where parents want it, they are willing to pay for it, and then it gets it into the Forest Hill system quicker than maybe, let's say, a JK program. So.
Is the data out there, you mentioned that 84% public includes homeschool and charter schools, and we, at least anecdotally, feel like there's been an increasing shift that way too in the last 5 years plus.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that data available? Is there any way to know that type of thing?
Yeah, we can actually provide who's choosing the public, not Forest Hills option. So So right now, coming out of COVID, we see a lot of people choosing Michigan Virtual College. I think Brighton, Clarkson, there's a couple other districts that support that Michigan Virtual program. We had like Grosse Pointe, there we have 1,000 kids that are virtual online. They're choosing the public option, but they're actually online through that program. So we'll be able to provide the administration team with ultimate back and forth.
And that's part of, if you remember, one of those updates I gave you, and had those charts with all the different school districts. That was that data.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
That we got from Metrics.
Oh,
Remember?
that's right,
Yeah.
that's right.
So that is
Yeah.
what he's,
Yeah.
Yeah, we collaborate a lot with Metrics, my school data, we just wrapped up another thing with Michigan State University, so a lot of data's out there, but it's how to use it to
right.
pull kids back into the district, so.
So with some of the homeschool programming, it seems some districts are capturing those students and offering different programming, like Jenison, the JIA
Mhm.
program in Hamilton. Can you speak to the success of those programs at all for like capturing some of those students that are choosing to homeschool with those families?
Yeah, so that really gets into your FT or full-time equivalency, so again, you get some shared time services, for that. But the question is, what do those parents specifically want? So I think that's some of that outreach, that we've seen districts work through the communications team, with the parent groups, like, what are you missing with that homeschool option? So if it's program A or B, we can offer that, and then at the end of the day, obviously, you get some of that, those funding dollars from the state from that perspective. They're not huge numbers, like full disclosure, but it's, 20, 30 kids is, some significant dollars that helps, again.
It's a classroom.
It's a classroom, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm familiar with shared time services and how they work and what the pros and the cons are. And it also has everything to do with who around us is providing it already, as to
Yeah.
whether, how many are really eligible for us.
Yeah.
We haven't pursued that yet, but it's something that we're familiar with and
Yeah.
well aware of, just so you know.
I'm familiar with, there are several families that are living in Belding and they are parting with JIA because there's nothing in between.
Correct.
And it's that sort of case where it's like, we could just look into some of those things.
And again, this is all for long-term planning, so this is,
Right.
sometimes we get hired, literally Grand Rapids was at a 3.5% fund balance, and the state's like, you got like 12 months to figure this thing out.
Right.
Dr. Roby's first, year coming out of COVID, Larry Ober's just retired, so there's a lot of movement, they had to move quickly. Other districts, I think, like Forest Hills, who's doing some active long-term planning, this just helps you kind of look the next 3 to 5 years. We don't see anything here that needs to be addressed immediately. But again, what are those opportunities of, let's say, utilization study, or does something have to pivot with, a capital plan? I don't believe you went qualified through your bond, so you have some flexibility. Farmington Hills did that, when they said, hey, we got this, so why don't we create this to do early childhood and pre-K versus this, and, kind of redirected some of those dollars that were provided from the bond funds.
Yeah, from our perspective, that would be a recommendation to do a building level assessment to determine utilization targets to see, you were asking earlier about, we have classroom spaces. This math says, especially at that elementary level, you likely do have excess space. And how are you best utilizing those buildings, and should there be some investigation of how to make adjustments at that level?
Or is there any sort of analysis on what school of choice should be, or what it could be, or?
We traditionally leave that up to the district and the community. You imagine Grosse Pointe, they went from 8,000 kids to 6,000 kids. They're at a point where now they have to make a really hard decision. They have like 2,000 kids between 2 high schools that each hold 2,000, so like they could all fit in one. So their board's really struggling with, what do I do with this information? One board member said we should open up school of choice. I said, well, you do fill in all 2,000 seats. The question is, at what grade levels? How do you handle, they don't have transportation, so they'll walk.
Right.
But how does that, so we tend to leave that up to the community just specifically. And again, Livonia, they went open wide school of choice, but they have 6 charters. So even though they have 800 seats open, they only fill like 350, 400. So just because you can do school of choice doesn't necessarily mean they're going to come. So it really goes back to what programs are you offering? Again, it's a competition for kids, and they are the clients. So what are those things that parents and teachers and community members want? And again, can you support that operationally? That's a whole other, quite hey, let's have a robust CT program. Like, well, the county already has one, so probably should do, so those are some of the questions we get into. That's a great question, because we get raised a lot with the Bloomfields, the Birminghams, the Grosse Pointes of what would school of choice do? Like, it might fill seats, but it might put a strain on the academics. So that's
Do these trends take into account these brand new things that are happening just in the next 6 months, pupil-wise, in terms of, 100+ junior kindergartners, additional school of choice coming in? I mean, I see that's a drop of 150, 200 kids per year, and we're maybe about to supplement by 200, at least this fall potentially, and maybe in the years ahead.
This is really what we're kind of looking for. The question is, you're at 675, you're going down to 475, so that's 200 kids.
Right.
And for your time period.
That's all the kids that exist.
There just won't be that many.
So the question is, yeah, you could do that, and it's gonna help flatten it
Yeah.
versus, the cliff. But again, when you start, again, if this was consistently 600, you'd actually see that line be flat and slightly up. Again, this is our first year really since, I think, 5 years ago. One of the things we would like to do is probably update this, based on the fall count. And that gives us a tier model, and then by the third year, it's like, it's very tight, so.
I think though too, to his question, when we talked about it, we recognized that we were doing some things, but we didn't want to put those into the numbers because we don't know what it was gonna look like. I
Correct.
thought you guys
That's
were
correct.
talking about that.
Yeah, so right now, that does not include the 100+ seats at JK, or the school of choice. There's actually an algorithm behind all of this. There's actually an eye chart that, just for ease, it's like, it literally shows like, what is your capture rate, what's cohort, so by year, if you're above 100%, you grew. If you're below, we can kind of show you like, hey, here's what the challenges were in 2019-20. Here's where you actually bounce back. By the way, the birth rate's still going like this. And your 6.8% is still 6.8%. So if we would have seen like a 7.5 from last year, this year, we would adjust that accordingly. But right now, that's kind of where we're at. But again, love an opportunity to again update it. And it's very cost effective to update that in the fall once you can get your audit numbers.
Can you go forward a slide? So the last bullet of this entire slide. So Forest Hills is in the same trend line as all the other schools in Kent County.
Actually, no, you're at a different trend. So Grand Rapids is like dropping off a cliff. Like
So we're doing better than some other schools.
Yes.
Okay, I just want that to be said out loud.
Your trend is actually very favorable to where your peer,
Okay.
not peers, but some of your neighbors are within the district, where
Thank you.
they're going down 15-20% in the next 5 years, and they have some very significant.
So we're all facing a problem, decline enrollment, but we're doing okay compared to.
Now, there are like 3 counties in the state that are actually growing, like just Lyndhurst, like so west of us, Ottawa is actually increasing, but not by like, it's like 3 or 4%. So it's not like this huge, 10-11% increase we saw in the 1990s.
They also have land.
They do.
I mean, they have so much land to build their
Entirely.
homes.
Yeah, I think, talking to Dirk Wheeldryer, they just had 2 developments approved for 1,600 homes.
Yeah.
And they're at 250 to 350,000 entry level, so guess what, those are probably gonna bring young
Lot of
families.
families.
And so they're, they're building new Dutton elementary schools, the first one they built since the
And
nineties.
it's like Forest Hills 30 years ago.
Correct.
Yeah.
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 Right.
Because I was kind of surprised that we are doing so well to our peers because that average home is so
Yeah.
expensive.
But again, that's why I think it's a destination district, so people
Yeah.
wanna be in Forest Hills, and they will, again, make that secondary house move or third house move when your kids are in that middle high school level, which is kind of keep your middle school right around 2,000 kids. But the question is, can you actually transition that many homes over the next 5 years to really stay flat? The answer is probably no.
Yeah, it's great to have.
Any other follow-up questions, by all means, reach out to the administration team, we'll be able to reach back, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.